Welcome back to the Epic Universal Podcast. I'm entertainment writer Jim Hill, and this is the podcast where we cover the latest Universal news, rumors, and history. And as always, I'm joined by Eric Hersey. And how are you this evening, Eric?
Hey, Jim, I don't even think I told you this yet. This is breaking, just like this episode. Jim, we have booked ourselves a night at the Grand Helios, and we're heading back to Epic in June for a day.
Lauren was talking about this. Now, are you taking advantage of that crazy price for the Helios?
We sure are. We talked about it jokingly that on the last episode. It's like, all right, you don't really necessarily book your trip around one great rate. But yeah, we did. We decided that, like, hey, if we're going to be able to a chance to stay at the Helios, I think we got it for like $219 or something like that. So we are going to see what it's like. And the best part for me is I'm going to do the water ride, the one in the Isle of Burke, because I hate getting wet, but we'll go and we'll do the water ride, and then I'll just go right back, change, and come back. It's beautiful.
Wow. Okay. So that's the fire brigade attraction, right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, fire drill. That's right. Yeah.
Cool. Oh, well, there we go. It's a twofer. You get to try the hotel and try the ride. So I love it. I love it. Anyway, okay. Just recently, again, we celebrated our 100th podcast, or 100th show on this podcast. And Eric at that time had asked folks if they would send along reviews. And they have continued to come in, and people are saying some very nice things about the show.
Everyone is wonderful. Yes, our goal is to keep more reviews than we have total shows. So we're on episode 103 for those who are counting, and I think we're at 109. So you guys got us a nice little cushion there. But hey, I did want to reach out. Like I said, if we get some, we'll keep reading. And so here's one from MZ Alicia, says, great Universal theme park info. Longtime Jim Hill podcast listener who is also enjoying Eric's epic journey exploring the Universal theme park. So 5-star. Thank you very much.
There we go.
And then we also have from Duke Silver Trio 30. Jim, do you know that reference? Do you know Duke Silver?
I do not.
It's a Park and Rec's. Nick Offerman played a character, Duke Silver, I believe, played the saxophone. Nice deep cut.
Nick Offerman.
Yeah, fantastic. So this is Great Friday Escape. This podcast is a great escape on Fridays. I'm growing to love the Universal Parks, and what Jim and Eric bring each week helps fill my need for info, fun, and history regarding Universal. Keep up the good work. Excellent listen. And if you guys want to give us a review, we very much appreciate it, and we'll read it online if they keep coming over. So head to jimhillmedia.com/epic. It takes you right to the Apple Podcast page, and you can give us a review. Once again, thanks MZ Alicia and Duke Silver. Keep up the wonderful saxophone playing there, Duke.
Cool. All right. And speaking of acknowledging things, we got to take a second here to acknowledge our sponsor, which is, of course, unlockmagic.com. And if you, like Eric, are planning a trip to Universal Orlando or the Walt Disney World Resort, please check out Unlock Magic. Listeners to the Epic Universal Podcast are saving up to 12% on theme park tickets and now have the ability to purchase Express Pass through Unlock Magic, saving even more money. So be sure and visit unlockmagic.com and save today. So, all right, we now reach the news portion of the podcast. So, what have you've been scouring the internet, Eric, what have you found this week?
Oh, Jim, did you see this one? We talked about it a couple weeks ago about the open hub access. It's happening. It is happening, Jim. So uncovered. Yes. Okay. So uncovered the open park. So what we have is a little bit of Instagram sleuthing. I think Alicia Stella might have broke this one. Okay. Either way, that's where I saw it. So thank you, Alicia, for that. So there is basically the Premier Beauty shows that is Premier Orlando. It's a conference down there, has mentioned on their Instagram post that they're going to have access to Celestial Park at Epic evening hours. Which essentially is kind of saying, hey, you are going to get in and do the open hub process, which we were talking. So for those who haven't kind of missed this, the open hub was essentially people can come in to Celestial Park, but they're not able to go into the lands, right? They're able to shop around, eat at the shop at the dining or the retail locations and eat at like Pizza Moon, Atlantic, Blue Dragon, and not enter the lands. But it looks like it's being trialed, and that's going going to happen, I think, like this, the 1st of June. There's the conference dates they have. I went to the website, the premiere, and I'm like, I wonder what this is like. What do you have to do? So anybody essentially that is part of that vendor or that expo is going to be able to head over to Celestial Park. What do you think about this, Jim?
My first question is this an event that's being held at the Orange County Convention Center, or are this where these folks for the what is it, the beauty group are meeting? Because
yeah, I think so. I think it is at the convention center.
Wow. So the very thing they talked about from this project from the first, the notion of creating a piece of straight pipe from the convention center over to this park. This is finally happening, and then to use this for the open hub, the nighttime entertainment thing. It's like, oh, that's genius. And think about it. They can literally, as a convention group comes into town, they send this email to the folks, and so it guarantees, what is it? That's retail, that's dining, and you have to assume that some of the folks who come through the gate and experience the nighttime show are going to want to come back and do the park or check out the hotels.
So here it is. It's Orange County Convention Center, and I just grabbed the dates. It is May 30th through June 1st, and if you're into beauty and all that, they're showing people getting live makeup, live hair. I'll have to talk to my barber. She's always doing these things. She's done many of the presentations, and I'm like, well, what you going down? You need someone to tag along to see how this works. But then again, I guess I'll be there in a couple weeks, so too much epic will be,
I'm always thrilled when something we talked about years ago actually happens. Kind of like the Monsters Inc. land opening at MGM. Right. And again, I'm dating myself. It hasn't been MGM since the 2010s. So all right. Anyway, and on last week's show, we were speculating about what was about to happen with Mythos, as the banner outside will tell you, the best restaurant, theme park restaurant in all of Orlando. And we now know officially that this is in fact going away, right?
Yeah, I think by the time the show aired on Friday, it was announced. So we just had the 2-day delay. I think we recorded either on Tuesday or Wednesday. But yeah, it's official that they said it will close in 2027. So we were kind of talking about, all right, this is why they're going to work on the Jurassic Park location. And I guess that's going to be upscaled a bit. I think we were kind of even talking briefly about what they were doing there. But yeah, we know that Mythos is going away. So, I imagine when they say they're going to shut down the restaurant, I don't think they're going to keep that location in the setting. That's a very specific building design. So I imagine everything is probably going to be demolished, much like they're doing with Poseidon's Fury and all that. So it is now confirmed.
And speaking of things that we've learned about what's about to happen to this part of Lost Continent is the Mystic Fountain is going away too, right?
Well, that's the rumor. So so I don't know if you can trust Mystic himself telling you this, but I guess supposedly he told a cast member hey, it's going to be you only got a couple more days to see me. But I think people ran with that, and I don't know if anybody has any insiders that got it. But it seems to me like all these walls are coming up. They're starting to break stuff down. I don't know how you can keep him shielded for much longer. The rumors was by today, if you're listening to this, he's down May 15th. But that's a shame, because I always enjoyed walking by, and we always talked with him, and I think he might be one of the last of his kind, right? I mean, do you know of any other scenario to spoil the illusion here, right? Mystic, there's somebody somewhere seeing and talking, right? Which that used to happen with a couple attractions. I think it was push the garbage can, right? In Epcot, yep. Was that the similar scenario, or?
Though what was interesting there is that Push was relatively kind, whereas, Mystic, basically lured, small boys into range and then blasted them, in fact, I wanted to ask, did Miles and Hunter get away unscathed, or did they get blasted?
Miles got blasted, I think, on several occasions, and he would taunt Mystic, not in a mean way, but like he would go and ask questions and so forth. But I just think that this was a wonderful little add-on that gave the reason that land a little bit of purpose. So I was always hoping they would relocate or do something else like this. But
come on, you have to. It's literally, it's a no-brainer to take this, over to the water park to make it his tiki cousin. Whatever you're going to do.
That's not a bad idea.
But Volcano Bay,
that's not bad at all.
You got to. It's just a classic piece of the park. So, and again, it just goes from one park to another park, and and if they move Mystic, I'll even start calling the water park a theme park. All right, so come on.
Oh, look at that. That's reason enough, Jim. That they've been wanting you to say four-wheel theme parks for a while now.
There we go.
No, so we'll see how he goes. But that if we'll know by the next episode if this was more than just a rumor.
And there are also water play areas out in CityWalk. So worst case scenario, you could move out there. But speaking of CityWalk down in Florida, we have news about the Hot Dog Hall of Fame. In fact, Steven Schlusser, the gentleman who did Rainforest Cafe and Boathouse at Disney, this was one of his as well, one of the restaurants that he invented. And now it's going away?
Yeah, well, I only got the one line here because I don't know much about it, but I mean, I'm not too familiar with the Hot Dog Hall of Fame. I really do need to spend more time in CityWalk. We just kind of run through it and so forth, but it looks to be in July it's going to close, and it'll be replaced by Fat One's Hot Dogs and Italian Ice, and I believe that is founded by Joey Fatone from NSYNC fame.
Yes, it is. So, I'm very happy he's moving into this space, but, if you do manage to get up to the Hot Dog Hall of Fame, at least when it first opened, what was kind of cool about it is the gimmick was that they had hot dogs from all of the different ballparks around the country, and you literally got to sit in seats that they had gotten from Fenway Park in Boston, and where the White Sox played in Chicago, and it would Schlusser really did some fun things there. But the thing with Steve is he's a guy who creates restaurants and then sells them to other people. So, I honestly, I kept an eye on it till he passed it along, and then, I haven't been back in years. But yeah, it was fun to be able to go there and, get an LA Dodger dog, that sort of thing.
That's not bad. I did not know that. I would actually seek that out. I think I might try to hit that up before they close down. So that is good. But it seems to me like Joey Fatone might like the theme parks because he's always performing. He's performed over at Epcot and he's performed at Universal. So I'm wondering if he's also a theme park guy. So maybe that's good synergy there.
Gotta be. So and speaking of things that are going down, well, this one's already gone down, right? The horror makeup show, though, thanks to our Eye in the Sky Bioreconstruct, we have a report on the very last show, right?
Yeah, Bioreconstruct was nice enough to send it over, so they did close it down. It was May 12th, I think, was the last show, and I was kind of following it all day. But Bioreconstruct kind of gave us a play-by-play of the last show, which is awesome. So it turns out that they were given wristbands, so it was a matter of we knew this was going to be standing room or sold out only. At the time, I think he might have said there was 160 people in queue to enter at the 7:15 show. Like we said, full seats, no seats left. Basically, it was like applause when they finally fit the last person in. So, but I guess the last show went off really well. They referenced themselves as the last show and even made jokes about like, hey, is this anybody's first time seeing this show, knowing that it's just a bunch of diehard theme park fans. And they had a standing O and had a curtain call that I guess there was a chant for the Monster Eddie to come out and bow. And also they had like the backstage stage manager and the control booth tech also kind of take a final bow, which was really cool. And it seemed like there was some families in attendance. So I don't know. I love to hear kind of like these final send-offs being, well done. And you've talked about one of these before, but it kind of reminded me of like what I heard about like the Adventurers Club. Didn't they have like a really cool like send off, semi send off, and then a couple weeks later you said that that somebody got a private show?
Yeah, no, that my pal Max Schilling, he had been lucky enough to book his bachelor party for the Adventurers Club, weeks beforehand, and Disney was kind enough to honor it. And speaking of being back in the club, just important to remember that Universal is shutting down the horror makeup club or show to freshen it, to change it out, and it will be back. So don't get too sad. It's coming back soon.
Yeah, and I think they said it was winter of 2026. We did hear that. They actually told us it was winter, so it's not even going to be down that long. So not too major construction.
Okay, so something major is happening over at the University of Central Florida. In fact, tied in with the Rosen College there, with some seed money from Universal Destinations and Experiences. Do you want to talk about this?
Yeah, I saw this. I don't know if it's a first of its kind, but it seems pretty cool that Universal and UCF basically are launching a new school for themed entertainment leadership. So I think there was a $10 million investment into this program. So it's basically creating a dual school model alongside, it's basically their School of Hospitality Leadership. So it's combining the themed entertainment education with business strategy, operations, marketing, and guest service training. So that sounds like resort training to me, if there ever was one.
That it does.
But Mark Woodbury was on hand and basically said it's designed to create, basically unite creativity, technology, and practical business application to develop the next generation of industry leaders. So we are seeing things like where they're working on service robotics, AR, VR, simulation technology, basically AI, digital twins aimed at improving operations and personalizing guest experiences. So I don't know, sounds like for anybody in Florida that wants to get into the themed entertainment world, this sounds like a great start to be an Imagineer or what did we call them at Universal? I know that they were special names before.
I think these days they're just happy with the staffers at Universal Creative.
Right.
There was
team.
Some sort of
Cinemagicians. That's what it was. They were Cinemagicians at one time.
A horrible name. All right, and speaking of cinema, as we close out the news segment this week, we have some info about Shrek 5. And what was fascinating to me about this is that as I shared this with Eric because I saw it in Licensing Global magazine, but in the middle of this article about Shrek 5, which, by the way, arriving in theaters June 30th, 2027, we got all sorts of info about Universal Kids Resorts in Frisco, Texas, which, by the way, we still don't have an opening date for.
Yeah. So, I mean, we know that there was like one of the mini lands down there, or one of their lands, I should say. I don't know if they're mini lands, they're just lands there, but we know that there's a whole
swamp. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So there's a whole aspect of it there, and they basically talk a little bit about it. And you can go over to Universal Kids now and kind of see all of the renderings, and the park is coming up. I mean, it seems to be about ready to go.
Yeah,
crazy not to have a date, but maybe it can coincide. Maybe they'll have some big release that's going along with Shrek. But I don't know, Jim. Shrek's going to be a big hit this summer. I almost forgot it was coming out, but it's less than it's about a month away.
Well, remember, it's actually 2027. In fact, that was the whole point of the article, just sort of talking about much in the way that Toy Story 5 now is is filling the shelves of Target and the like, that this time next year, Shrek 5 will be,
that makes a lot more sense. Yes.
They were showing off, for example, the Shrek 5 Lego sets and that sort of thing. So, to circle back to Universal Kids in Frisco, Texas, again, just kind of fascinated that, here we are just weeks out from Memorial Day, which typically is considered the start of summer. And it's like, ooh, shouldn't we have a date by now? Not to be a nudge, nice people at Universal Products and Experiences, but hey, some of us would like to make plans to come see the park, and it helps when you're booking a plane to know a date when it opens. So
especially, if people were trying to make it for summer, summer's here. It's coming real close. Everybody, most of us that have kids are like we're in like the glory of like, all right, let's get through this last couple weeks of school and let's get to the vacation. So it'd be interesting. But as soon as they announce, we will cover it and we will see how we can get to Florida or to Texas. We've been all over the country this year, Jim. I don't know, and we still got to make it to Philadelphia.
We do. We got to get there before September to see the Universal exhibit at the Franklin Institute. But before we do that, we got to get to this week's feature, which continues the story of Casper that we shared on last week's show, and we're going to talk about the ride that almost got built for the park. But before we get to that, there's this.
Starting a business can seem like a daunting task, unless you have a partner like Shopify. They have the tools you need to start and grow your business. From designing a website to marketing to selling and beyond, Shopify can help with everything you need. There's a reason millions of companies like Mattel, Heinz, and Allbirds continue to trust and use them. With Shopify on your side, turn your big business idea into... Sign up for your $1 per month trial at shopify.com/special offer.
And we're back. So weren't you last week, Eric, talking about you were going to go watch, what was it, the Casper Christmas movie?
I think I told you offline. I was like, I think I own that. I think I own the DVD. I looked. I didn't find it right off the get-go. But then again, I wasn't looking too hard to give myself homework for something I would regret. But
there we go. There we go. So anyway, folks, again, on last week's show, we were talking about the Casper movie that Universal released to theaters back in May of 1995. And what's intriguing about this film is it was produced by Amblin Entertainment. And that, of course, is Steven Spielberg's personal production company. And Steven was the one who definitely championed this film. For example, he hand-selected the director for it. Brad Sibberling, he had seen an episode of the television show Brooklyn Bridge that Brad had directed and thought, okay, that kid shows potential. Let's give him a chance to do a feature. He hired Sherry Stoner and Dina Oliver, who were writers for Tiny Toon Adventures, which, by the way, Amblin Entertainment produced in conjunction with Warner Brothers Animation. So this is, Steven picked the director, he picked the writers, and he was very, very hands-on when it came to this Casper movie. In fact, if you might remember this from having seen it, Eric, but there was a famous scene in it. This was the early days of morphing. And so, the character that Bill Pullman plays in the film, Dr. James Harvey, at one point he's in the bathroom, he looks in the mirror and proceeds to watch his face change from Clint Eastwood's to Rodney Dangerfield's, then it was Mel Gibson, and finally ended with the Crypt Keeper, who, in a very meta moment, then put his hands on either side of his cheeks and did a Kevin from Home Alone Macaulay Culkin like,
yeah.
So, but the interesting thing is that Brad actually shot one more person that Dr. James Harvey was supposed to change into, and it was Steven Spielberg himself. And again, to Mr. Spielberg's credit, when they cut it together, he watched himself in there, and it's like, well, as a director, I'm not much of an actor. I think we need to cut that. So, but Mr. Spielberg, wasn't just hands-on with the films that he made for Universal. He was also very hands-on with the Universal parks. And Eric, I wanted to ask, had you ever heard about the deal that Steven signed with Universal back in January of '87, where he agreed from that point forward to consult on all the stateside Universal parks and the one they were going to build in Japan?
Well, if I recall correctly, we talked about it before, and he made a boatload of money because of this deal, right? Like, this is something that's to this day we believe.
No, absolutely. And in fact, what was interesting, he gets 2% of the gate. And I want to say also an unspecified chunk of merch and food sales. But, what's interesting is every so often Universal will release, yes, in the past year, Mrs. Spielberg has earned $34 million or that sort of thing. And it was originally only supposed to run through 2009. The deal was extended in 2017, and it's since, because they want Steven around. If anything, they wanted him very much to be on hand for the opening of the park in Beijing. So it's now into perpetuity that, he gets this across his lifetime. And what's fascinating about this, again, Steven was not involved with the Universal Parks till '87. Now, mind you, if we jump back to October of '76, and in fact, we've talked about this on the Epic Universal podcast previously, that this was when Lou Wasserman, the then head of MCA, wanted very much to get into the Central Florida theme park business, and this is when he launched his hostile takeover for SeaWorld. But the way he had the money to do this was because the summer of '76, Jaws had made so much damn money. But of course, as we mentioned on that show, Universal loses out to Harcourt, Brace, and Yovanovitch. So, but they still want to be in the
book company, right? A book company got them.
Textbook company. There we go. But July of '81, Universal buys 423 acres of land in Central Florida, and they are going to, the plan is to open the park, which it was originally known as Universal City, Florida, in 1984. But here's the thing, Eric. The very day that this news gets reported in the New York Times, and again, I want to stress this date, July 29th, 1981, on the lower lot out in Hollywood, in the Jack Webb bungalow, Universal meets with reps from Paramount Pictures, because the idea is that we're building this park in Florida and we would like some financial partners. So, we're going to show you everything that we're planning on building in Florida. And one of the people seated in this bungalow is one Michael D. Eisner, the president of Paramount Pictures. And, and now if we jump ahead, September of 2000, September 22nd, 1984, Michael Eisner is now the CEO of the Walt Disney Company. And one of the ways he's become the CEO, Eric, is because George Lucas and Steven Spielberg personally contacted members of the Disney Board of Directors and said, hey, if you give our friend Michael Eisner the job, make him your CEO, we will come make movies for Disney. And remember that the reason that they did this is back when these two were trying to get Raiders of the Lost Ark made. They walked that movie around to every studio in town. This is the fall of 1979, by the way. And it was only Michael at Paramount who was willing to look at the deal they laid out and were like, all right, if this movie's a really big hit and, and by the way, you two morons have made movies that have made a lot of money. So, all right, we'll roll a dice. We'll take a risk. And of course, Raiders comes out in June of 1981 and is an enormous hit. But it only got made because Michael Eisner said yes. So again, Michael gets a job because of Lucas and Spielberg, or it helps. But now, Eric, the part of the story that almost never gets told. Right after Michael becomes Disney's new CEO, Universal reaches out. And first of all, they congratulate him on his new job. And then they bring up the fact that, well, we showed you all of our plans, So I was wondering if you wanted to entertain an idea that Disney and Universal would collaborate on a studio park down in Florida. You saw the plans. They were pretty good, don't you think? They all wanted to stress that, well, you remember that Walt Disney and Jules Stein were great friends back in the 60s. In fact, Walt lent Imagineers to Jules to help set up this, the studio tour here in Hollywood. And Michael almost immediately shuts it down and said, I can't. Besides, Disney already has something similar in the works. And sure enough, February of 1985, the very first annual meeting that Michael's in charge of, well, first of all, he reveals that Disney will be teaming up with Lucasfilm for attractions to the park. In fact, at this meeting, which was held at the Orange County Convention Center in Anaheim, said that first thing that Lucas's company is working on is an innovative ride based on his Star Wars creation, and it will utilize technologies never seen before in a Disney theme park. But then, April 30th in 1985, Disney announces that a third gated attraction for Walt Disney World, a studio tour. And this is where the folks at Universal start to get mad because in short order here, June of 1985, Disney signs a 20-year licensing agreement with MGM UA for use of the name with the project. They break ground on the park in March of 86. And finally, Universal, which has been struggling to find a financial partner, they announce in December of 86 that, that it's officially announced and they're going to be breaking ground on their project soon. But that very same month, here's Spielberg delivering on his promise to Disney. Who Framed Roger Rabbit begins production, and Steven produces that. But then in this pretty much the same window of time, Eric, one Saturday, George Lucas says, hey, Steven, come with me. I'm going to Imagineering. I want you to see something. And it's like, and he takes Steven to Imagineering, and they ride the Star Tours prototype. Mm-hmm. And this is the thing, Steven thinks this is amazing, but he immediately goes to, the folks at Universal. And what he basically says is, well, Disney's doing this and you guys should probably, do something similar, a ride like that. And anyway, Star Tours opens at Disneyland June 9th, 1987. And 11 days later is when Spielberg signs his contract with Universal as a theme park consultant. And this is when he starts getting that 2% of the admissions. And Spielberg, very, very, very much involved in finaling what Universal builds in Florida. In fact, he's the guy who comes up with the sort of the catchphrase for the project, ride the movies. And evidently it's under Steven's leadership that we go from Kong, Earthquake, and Jaws being just vignettes on the Universal Hollywood Tram Tour to being full rides down in Florida. And Steven even goes so far as, well, he's the actual host of the pre-show film for the E.T. Adventure, which, of course, is based on his huge hit for Universal, which came out in June of 82. And, all right, if we jump ahead to June of 88, Roger Rabbit comes out in theaters, and again, produced by Steven Spielberg, is directed by Robert Zemeckis, who is, a protege of Spielberg. I mean, he's the guy who directed Back to the Future in '85. Steven's the one who cut the deal with Warner Brothers, which was how they got the Bugs Bunny, Daffy Duck, and all that. Anyway, jump ahead. May '89. MGM opens, and Spielberg and Lucas are there. In fact, I went to the press conference where, after they showed us the first two scenes from the Indiana Jones Epic Stunt Spectacular, Spielberg and Lucas were there talking about Last Crusade, which would be opening up in just a couple of weeks, and we're thinking of bringing some of the scenes from that movie here to Florida. And meanwhile, out in California at Universal Hollywood, construction is already underway on Back to the Future, the ride. Though what's interesting about this version of the attraction, Eric, is that it's actually built to the front of the park on top of the 7-story tall Frankenstein parking structure. And it's only after they're well into construction that they realize that, this isn't going to be able to handle the stress load, and we're going to have to stop construction and build it somewhere else in the park.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
No, I didn't realize that. I had no idea, because I was going to say, that's not where I know it's at.
No. It's so funny, because if you get a souvenir map from '89, they literally include, an arrow and a line like, Back to the Future, the ride, coming soon here at this part, in the front of the park, on top of the parking structure. But, all right. Anyway, back to Florida. June of 1990, Universal Studios Florida opens, and Mr. Spielberg is there to help cut the ribbon. At this point, he's being okay toggling back and forth between Disney and Universal. Where this starts to go south is the summer of '89. This is when Honey, I Shrunk the Kids comes out. The first Honey, I Shrunk the Kid movie comes out, and it has a Roger Rabbit cartoon out in front of it, Tummy Trouble, and it's one of the big hits of that summer. So Spielberg, who's making what's called a thrill-omedy. Have you ever seen this, Arachnophobia? The one
No, but I mean, I know of it because of this story, because it's that's how I know. But what is arachnophobia? Like you said,
it's a horror comedy. In fact, it's one of the very first things that John Goodman does after Roseanne becomes a giant hit. In fact, a lot of the laughs in the film come from this is a sad story to tell, but there's a van in this movie for John's company, and on the side of the van it's Bugs Be Gone. Well, my pal Brian Gone was a friend of the production designer, and he deliberately painted the thing on the side of the thing as a tribute, be gone, as in Brian Gone. John, Brian was always thrilled that he whenever John Goodman was on screen, you could see his name.
That's awesome.
But anyway, Spielberg is making this horror comedy for Disney. And, and so Spielberg saw the amount of money that, the previous summer that Honey, I Shrunk the Kids had made with a Roger Rabbit cartoon in front of it. And so, and he knew that the folks down in Florida were making Roller Coaster Rabbit. And he's like, ooh, I would really like it if you would put Roller Coaster Rabbit in front of, Arachnophobia. I think that would really help the box office. And Jeffrey Katzenberg was like, oh boy, I wish I could do that. But I already promised Warren Beatty that we'd put Roller Coaster Rabbit in front of Dick Tracy. And, Dick Tracy arrives in theaters June 15th, 1990, and makes over $100 million at the box office. And Arachnophobia shows up literally a month and days later, June 18th, 1990, and just doesn't do the same sort of business. And Mr. Spielberg did not forget that. And this was the moment he stopped being a Disney fan. And when we get back, we will talk about what happens when you tick off Steven Spielberg. But before we do that, there's this.
Eczema is unpredictable, but you can flare less with Ebglyss, a once-monthly treatment for moderate to severe eczema. After an initial 4-month or longer dosing phase, about 4 in 10 people taking Ebglyss achieved itch relief and clear or almost clear skin at 16 weeks. And most of those people maintain skin that's still more clear at 1 year with monthly dosing.
Ebglyss, lebrikizumab LBKZ, a 250 milligram per 2 milliliter injection, is a prescription medicine used to treat adults and children 12 years of age and older who weigh at least 88 pounds or 40 kilograms with moderate to severe eczema, also called atopic dermatitis, that is not well controlled with prescription therapies used on the skin or topicals, or who cannot use topical therapies. Ebglyss can be used with or without topical corticosteroids. Don't use if you're allergic to Ebglyss. Allergic reactions can occur that can be severe. Eye problems can occur. Tell your doctor if you have new or worsening eye problems. You should not receive a live vaccine when treated with Ebglyss. Before starting Ebglyss, tell your doctor if you have a parasitic infection.
Ask your doctor about Ebglyss and visit ebglyss.lilly.com or call 1-800-LILY-RX or 1-800-545-5979.
Halliday presents, in the red corner, the undisputed, undefeated Weed Whacker Guy. Champion of hurling grass and pollen everywhere. And in the blue corner, the challenger, extra strength Halliday. Eye drops that work all day to prevent the release of histamines that cause itchy allergy eyes. And the winner by knockout is Halliday. Halliday, bring it on.
And we're back. Okay, now, Eric, when we previously talked about Universal Studios Florida, we talked about that horrible first summer when I think the only thing that reliably worked in the park was the Ghostbusters show. Is that what you recall? Or
yeah, there was nothing else was working. There was all types of issues. Jaws was shut down. King Kong having issues. Yeah, it was not a great opening.
It was not. But to their credit, again, the park opens in June of 1990. By May 1st, 1991, Back to the Future, the ride, opens in Florida, and right out of the box, it's a smash hit. It's a flat out wonderful ride that people really enjoy, and people made special trips back to the park to check that out. And by then, most of the tech issues had been fixed. I mean, Jaws was closed and wouldn't open for another couple of years. It took a while to fix that one, but people came back and really enjoyed the park, and a lot of people credit Back to the Future, the ride, getting them through the door. And we were just talking earlier about Roger Rabbit, the movie that Robert Zemeckis directed. And what was kind of interesting is, think about this. The original Back to the Future comes out in July of 1985. Then, literally from that film, Zemeckis transitions over to working on Who Framed Roger Rabbit. That starts shooting December of 86. Once that's done, he starts shooting Back to the Future 2, which goes straight into Back to the Future 3. And so by this point, they have a script for, actually, they have several scripts for Roger Rabbit sequels and prequels. And Zemeckis just flat out tells Disney and Spielberg, is like, no, I can't. I cannot spend, 10 years of my life making sequels to movies that I already made. I'm sorry, I can't do it. And, he goes off, and to his credit, you look at some of the films that he's done since, and, things like Forrest Gump, some of them are absolutely amazing. But anyway, we now jump to it's 1995, and Casper opens in theaters. And meanwhile, if we move ahead a year, June of 1996, Jurassic Park, the ride, opens out in Hollywood. And what's fascinating about this moment is that for the folks who work at Universal Creative, who have been looking over their shoulder at Splash Mountain, which, remember, opened at Disneyland in July of 1989. It's like, okay, we finally have a ride that, is the equivalent of a Splash Mountain. But, what we don't have at the Universal Parks is an equivalent to Disney's Haunted Mansion. And, what can we do? And so they look hard at Casper. So hard that they do serious development on this. And in fact, I did we mention on last week's show the reason that we actually went down this road, that Len saw the prototype ride vehicle backstage?
You briefly mentioned it, but I have questions. But
okay.
What did we see, and why was Len there, and can we see it again?
Well, I don't know if I can reveal why Len was there, but what he saw was a cartoony style bed on a piece of track. And by the way, I had the control mechanism wrong. I mentioned that it was a bedpost, and that, the idea that was, where you were sitting on the bed, you could push the bedpost, and there were a couple of branching moments in the attraction where, depending on what the majority voted for, that's where you went in whipstaff manner. It turns out, at least, I guess the one that's backstage now has a candelabra on the bed, which I guess lights the way, and it was still supposed to have a branching mechanism. I don't know exactly how that worked, but anyway, Len was wandering around backstage with friends and came across this thing that was just sitting there that evidently was used for a presentation at Universal to try to sell folks on going forward with this attraction. But the way things work in Hollywood is, okay, we're going to make it on, we're going to make an attraction based on that hit movie. It's like, oh, look, there's another hit movie. And in this case, July of, the following year, 1997, is when the first Men in Black movie opened in theaters. And, and then just a little bit after that is when over at the Magic Kingdom in Florida is when the Space Ranger spin opened at the Magic Kingdom.
Yeah.
Your interactive ride through. And suddenly Universal didn't just want a response. Suddenly it's like, well, do we really want a Haunted Mansion? Or do we want a Buzz Lightyear? And if we want a Buzz Lightyear, and that's set in space and that features aliens and, oh, hey, Men in Black, Alien Attack. Which, by the way, finally opens April of 2000 down in Florida. And David Cobb is the gentleman who rode herd on this thing. He led the creative team and on this interactive ride, which by the way has so much fun with the Disney theme parks. I mean, you've seen the posters in the queue, which are so clearly riffing on Disney attraction posters from the 50s and the 60s.
Oh yeah. I mean, I really appreciate that ride for just the World's Fair nature of it in general.
Oh yeah, no,
I was really surprised. I don't remember even knowing about this ride until I stepped foot. Mm-hmm. It was just a hidden gem to me, and then I'm like, this has been fantastic.
Yeah, so, yeah, and it's ultimately rewritable. And
yes.
By the way, how high a score have you managed to get on the ride?
I don't know the score, but I'm always the first one to hit the button, so I always get the bonus. So
okay.
My kids get mad quite often that I'm always just a second ahead of the first person in the vehicle to hit the red button.
Okay. Now, how, again, it has that lovely interactive, the end where, depending on how well you shot, you get Will Smith, who, that pulls out the neuralizer to make you forget, or you get the coach. But one time when I was down there for a press event, I had this lovely press handler from Universal who coached me, to get the top impossible score. And I actually got the final AA figure at the end, who was your tailor. No way. You had made it into the Men in Black. And
wow.
And, and the beautiful thing is when you make it to the very end of that ride, what the tailor tells you is, I'm working on your suit. It'll be ready Tuesday. And that's, so you have to come back to the attraction, and pick up your suit.
No, I didn't even know it had an interactive ending like that. I just assumed we were all the same. How cool. All right, I'll have to test that out next time we go.
Well, there we go. But again, the downside of getting Men in Black Alien Attack is we just didn't get our Casper ride. But again, want to stress the ride system is backstage. It's mounted on some track. It's still there for people to eyeball and consider. And remember, Steven Spielberg is still a consultant for the Universal theme parks. And more to the point, Mr. Spielberg is still in the Casper business. When we started this story last week, we were talking about the brand new Casper series that Universal is producing for Disney Plus, or at least that they're making a pilot for it. And Mr. Spielberg is the executive producer of that. And, well, who knows? If that's successful, maybe we will finally get our Casper ride, though now the question is, will we get it at Universal or will we get it at Disney?
Oh, man. Wow. I mean, I'm wondering, has Steven done anything with Disney since Roger Rabbit? Because I know that got nasty, and he pretty much picked his side. And tell you the truth, Universal does a pretty good job keeping Spielberg mentioned and involved. Remember, he was the one that kind of helped with Dark Universe and Monsters Unchained, says the documentary.
There we go. There we go. I mean, Mr. Spielberg has on occasion worked for Disney. In fact, for example, the BFG, based on the Roald Dahl story, he directed that for Disney. And, it is a never say never situation. But again, you're not wrong. Universal does keep Mr. Spielberg very, very busy. In fact, Disclosure Day, his new film coming out next month, I want to say that didn't Universal Florida already mention that there's going to be some sort of an exhibit there in the park for Disclosure Day?
Oh, I haven't seen it yet, but I wouldn't doubt that seems like the synergy they need. So maybe we'll see what's going on there, and maybe it'll be in the queue of ET.
There we go. Well, all right. And on that note, folks, that will do it for this week's edition of the Epic Universal Podcast. And by the way, if you have topics and suggestions for future stories that you'd like myself and Eric to talk about on this podcast, please feel free to send those along to us through social media. And with that, again, just want to thank you for listening to this edition of the Epic Universal Podcast. And Mr. Hersey and I will be back next week.